It's the year 2021, and I think everybody is becoming super aware of how cognitive bias can affect our overall decisioning ability. And one of the things we're trying to do is eliminate that bias everywhere. In this video series, I thought I'd explore how cognitive biases actually affect our software architecture as well. And in this first video, we're going to look at the halo effect and the horn effect. So, what is the halo effect? Well, it's when we have a good impression of a person, a brand, or an entity in a single area or dimension. And then we allow that good impression to over influence our overall impression of that brand, person, or entity in another, potentially unrelated area. So, let me give you an example. So, today we're filming on a Sony camera. I love that camera, I think it's a great camera, right? And therefore, I have a good impression. And therefore, I might have a cognitive bias towards Sony as a brand. Now, if Sony were to come out with a pair of shoes, then I could be going, oh my goodness, Sony's got a great pair of shoes. I want to go and buy that. I love their camera. Now, Sony obviously has no experience of making shoes, right? They make cameras, they make TVs, etc. But my biased impression of Sony from this good impression of this great camera that I've got might make me go and buy a pair of shoes for absolutely no reason. And we see this all the time in many areas. So a good example of the halo effect in business is the fact that most CEOs are over 6 feet tall. Now, you know and I know that how tall you are has got absolutely no reflection on your ability to run a business. Yet, that physical trait has overly influenced over many, many years the hiring policies and the opportunities made available to those individuals, which has resulted in a bias in the CEO positions. Now, today we're becoming more and more aware of these cognitive biases, and we want to remove them from all aspects of business wherever we can. So we've given a few examples of the halo effect, but actually the halo effect can affect the technology architectures that we design. And in this video, we're going to explore where the halo effect has had impact in our architectures, and then how we can remove those biases as we're designing software systems. I think one of the typical examples of the halo effect is going to be in the area of cloud and cloud services. So, for example, people who have got a Microsoft background, such as myself, I had a long history of writing C# and .NET, and therefore, if you come from that background or even a Windows background, then you're going to gravitate naturally towards the Microsoft cloud, and that's because you've had a great experience with Microsoft technologies, and then Microsoft came out with a cloud, and therefore you gravitate towards that. There are other clouds such as Amazon or AWS, but you may not have evaluated that because you've had that great experience with Microsoft, and then you've gravitated towards their cloud. And that's an example of the halo effect in operation. It's not to say that Microsoft doesn't have a great cloud, but if you haven't evaluated any other clouds, you're allowing your fantastic experience, your great impression that you've had in one area, affect your decisioning in other areas. It may be the right choice, it may be the wrong choice, but you haven't evaluated that. Using this same example, there's also a reverse halo effect, or the horn effect, which is if you've had a negative experience with somebody, person, brand, or entity in a single area, and that may overly influence your impression of them in another area. So, for example, taking the same cloud example, let's say that you come from an Oracle background, a Java background, and you come from a Linux background, then you may gravitate towards Oracle Cloud, you may gravitate towards Google Cloud, or even Amazon's Cloud, but because you have this background of not working with Microsoft technologies or even hating Microsoft in some areas, then you may decide not to touch Azure at all. Even though it can run Linux workloads and run Java workloads, you may not consider that at all because you've got this negative bias, this reverse halo effect, or the horn effect. So again, it's just something to be aware of, that these biases can affect your decisioning even in architectures. Now, other places that we can see the halo effect in clouds would also be on the usage of cloud services. Because once you're locked into a cloud, then you may not consider the fact that other clouds have other services, right? So maybe you're not thinking multi-cloud. Good example is, let's say you're on Amazon Cloud, and what I want to do is use some sort of text-to-speech service, a cognitive service. And naturally, I will just grab the available services from Amazon Cloud. I'll just have a look and say, okay, there's a text to speech service here, and then I'll just use it and consume it. But there may be a better text to speech service on a different cloud. Maybe Google has got a better text to speech service because, all of the research and insights that they've had from Google Translate may mean they have wider and richer languages. But because of this halo effect, you wouldn't have evaluated or not necessarily evaluated other cloud services, and you've just used the cloud services that are available to you. And that is because you've let your great experience in one particular area have an effect on your overall impression and bias you towards using those services in that area. So again, it's something to be aware of, and as you're going through your technology decisions, as you're evaluating your architectural choices, to make sure that you are aware of the halo effect. I'm not saying it's wrong to stick with the services on one particular cloud. What I'm saying is that you should be aware of that bias because it may creep into your architecture and the choices that you're making. Another place in your architecture where the halo effect could over influence your decisions could be in programming languages and frameworks. So maybe I'm a software developer. Maybe I'm developing mobile apps and I'm using Flutter and the Dart language to develop my mobile apps, and I could really love it. I think it's great. And then suddenly I need to build a web application, and I realize Flutter for Web has just come out. And I go, wow, I love Flutter so much, I'm going to develop my new web application using Flutter for Web. I love Flutter, I love mobile applications. That's what I'm going to use to build it. But I haven't evaluated other frameworks or languages that could be more appropriate. As you know, things like JavaScript, things like React or Angular or Svelte or Vue could be way more appropriate because they're languages and frameworks that have been in the web domain for a long time. But because I'm a Flutter developer and because I love the Dart language and the framework so much, I'm being over influenced by my great impression from the mobile app experience, which may or may not translate into web. So again, that could be an area where the halo effect could be affecting my choices. And to take the halo effect even further, if I go back to cloud, means a Flutter developer might love Flutter so much and therefore love the Google brand so much that I might be influenced to go to Google Cloud because of my great experience with Flutter. And again, not evaluated other clouds. And again, that's where the halo effect can affect me in my software architecture. I sort of jumped on Flutter there, but actually the same could be the opposite in the web space, right? So let's take something like JavaScript. I could be a JavaScript and a React developer, and then I decide I need to build some mobile applications, and therefore I might just jump straight into something like React Native without considering iOS native, Android native, or even Flutter itself. So again, similar example, but this time web into mobile. And again, it can also jump from front-end experiences to back-end experience. Maybe I'm an iOS developer. I develop in Swift and I love Swift as a language. And I decide I want to build some microservices. And I might love Swift so much that I decide I'm going to start building microservices in Swift. I can do that. There is server-side Swift available, and I might jump into that. But again, for my application, my experiences, I may be better to build my backend microservices in Java or C# or JavaScript Node.js, but I haven't evaluated it because I've taken the great experience I've had with Swift in the front end that I haven't evaluated or considered what the architecture would mean if I was to develop with Swift in the backend. And Swift in the backend may be a completely different experience, but I've allowed my halo effect to over-influence my decisioning there. So we've covered programming languages and cloud services. Another area where we could be experiencing the halo effect could be in the area of digital platforms. So what do I mean by digital platforms? So typically we mean things like content management systems, marketing platforms, analytics platforms, commerce platforms, customer data platforms, and as they all sort of join together, they form digital platforms as a whole. And there's lots and lots of vendors in that area who produce fantastic and great digital platforms. And that again is an area where the halo effect can over influence my architecture. Good example. Let's use Flutter again as an example. If I really love Flutter and I have had a great experience with them, and therefore I start to love the Google brand, I might then lean towards something like Google Analytics, and I might not be considering other analytics provider because I'm being over influenced by the particular by the brand, and that then affects me in my digital platform area. Now, on the same thing within those digital platforms, maybe I'm working with a good content management system, and I'm really loving it, and I think this is a great content management system. And now I want to go and implement a commerce system. Now, looking at the great content management system I've got, I may pick the same digital platform provider for my content management system for my commerce system. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that, right? And there's a lot of great reasons where you would want to use the same provider because you're going to get this interconnected experience. But if you've just been over influenced by the halo effect, I've had a great experience over here, it doesn't compute that a great CMS equals a great commerce engine, or a great commerce engine equals a great analytics engine. Now, a lot of these platform providers are absolutely fantastic and they've got great offerings, and there's probably nothing wrong with that. But if you haven't done the evaluation as a whole and you've just allowed that great impression that you've got to over influence your decision without weighing up the pros and cons and figuring out the integrations and figuring out whether that platform truly meets your needs, then you may end up making the wrong decisions because you've let the great experience that you've had in one dimension over influence your impression in other areas. So again, that's something to be really careful about. Digital platforms is another area where you could experience the halo effect. So we have been talking architecture, but I'm going to come out of the architectural domain for a second. I'm going to think about the whole technology delivery aspect. And one of the areas that I think that you can also experience the halo effect is going to be in your team and your team makeup. So a good example of this is, let's say you're building a brand new service and you need to build a great new front end. And you might look at that and go, wow, Jemima over there, she was absolutely fantastic front end developer on my last project. And I'm going to go and build this other project now. And I need someone to build a back-end service, or maybe I need someone to build a machine learning service. And your first thought is, I'm going to get Jemima on my team to build that service because she was just fantastic. And there's nothing against Jemima. She may be absolutely brilliant. She may be great, but maybe she has absolutely no experience in machine learning, right? Maybe there's somebody else who is available who's got fantastic experience, but you haven't considered them because you've been over influenced by this wonderful person that you worked with before. So why is that a bad thing? Well, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe you're going to be successful in your delivery. So maybe Jemima is going to just absolutely rocket machine learning, but perhaps there was somebody else. Maybe Jane has got all of this great experience in machine learning already, and therefore she'd be able to deliver your project faster and quicker, bring all her great experience. But because you never evaluated other team members, you just went straight to the person that you worked with before, you've lost that opportunity to really move forward. And that could end up making your software delivery fail because you've filled your team with inexperienced members, people who are great, but they're great in a different domain, not in the domain that you need them to be great in. So again, that's something to be really aware of. And not only could your software delivery fail, but also you could be missing the opportunity to build great and diverse teams because you're not giving opportunities to other people who could be fantastic if given that opportunity. You're just giving opportunities to the people that you know and people that that have shone in the past. And again, I think that doesn't just apply to team and people. Same sort of thing could apply to your partners and vendors that make up your software delivery. So again, something to be aware of. Big message here is be aware of these cognitive biases. The halo effect and the horn effect is really a bias that can affect your software delivery, your technology architecture. And now that you're aware of it, just make sure as you're doing these assessments that you're thinking to yourself, am I being over influenced by another dimension? As you're doing these evaluations and you're making these choices, just think to yourself, is this a Sony pair of shoes or is this a Sony camera? Am I opening up the opportunities? Am I truly evaluating the choices that I could make? So now that you're aware of this bias, How do you solve this in your architecture? Well, first step is just being aware of it, right? Actually challenging yourself on the decisions that you make, that you're not applying some sort of cognitive bias. Second thing is to open up for assessment, right? Have other people review the work, have diverse teams, have people from different backgrounds and experiences to evaluate the decisions that you make, right? Open it up. And therefore you can get to the point of saying, oh, have I been biased here? Have I really looked at all options? Write your options down. Use things like architectural decisions. Use things like have architectural review boards, so to open that up and sort of challenge your choices. Use things like pre-mortem reviews. Really think about what could go wrong. Have you got the right balance and mindset? So there are a couple of the techniques you could use to test yourself against these biases. Anyway, I hope this has been super useful for you, and I look forward to talking about the next bias in one of the next videos. Thanks very much. Have a